Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Older Workers Summit. My name is Kathy Newhook, and I'm the Manager of Communications and Engagement at the Harris Centre. Before we get started, there's a few housekeeping items, the usual selection of housekeeping items. Emergency exits are out through that door and out through the main doors where you came in, or down over the stairs. There's another set of doors out to the parking lot. I feel like I am an airline stewardess. You know, there won't be emergency lights lit up along your way. You don't have to worry about vests unless you're planning to jump that way. Washrooms are also outside, the muster station then is at the end of the parking lot by the dumpsters. Hopefully we won't have to go out there because it's yucky out. The washroom, there's a single stall accessible washroom just outside this door. There are also more washrooms located down the hallway when you first came in and down the hallway that runs this way. Please turn off your cell phones. You don't have to turn them off, but put them on silent to be respectful. And we'll be taking some photos during the session, probably not lots, but if that's an issue, if you don't want to show up in some sort of communications material that I'll put together later, let me know, and I'll try to make sure I Photoshop out your head. We'll also be webcasting this morning's session. We haven't widely promoted the webcast option, but we wanted to make sure that people who wanted to watch the session's presentations that are happening this morning can do so online afterwards as well. And so if you know anybody who had to miss today's session, you can let them know that they'll find it on the Harris Centre's website. Before we get too far into today's activities, I would also like to respectfully acknowledge the territory in which we are gathered as the ancestral homelands of the Beothuk, and the island of Newfoundland as the ancestral homelands of the Mi'kmaq and the Beothuk. We would also like to recognize the Inuit of Nunatsiavut and Nunatuhivut, and the Innu of Nitassinan and their ancestors as the original people of Labrador. We strive for respectful relationships with all the people of this province as we search for collective healing and true reconciliation and honor this beautiful land together. The format for today's session, we've set aside about 2 hours, maybe a little less, this morning for some presentations. That will be followed by a panel presentation, or panel discussion, and an opportunity to ask some questions, I'm going to say of the experts, but also people with some lived experience and expertise in their own way. And we'll have discussion about the key challenges and opportunities related to older workers. After the panel, we'll roll into a facilitated working group session. This will be the opportunity for us to really put our heads together on solutions and solutions to the challenges and issues raised this morning, but it will also provide us an opportunity to roll up our sleeves and set a plan to work towards some of the solutions identified in our working groups. We'll end the session today with an opportunity to share the things that we've been chatting about in our small groups back to the main group, and of course all of that will be captured in a kind of summation report and distributed after the fact. So I would now like to turn things over to Dr. Suzanne Brake, Newfoundland and Labrador Seniors Advocate. Dr. Brake has a lengthy history of involvement in the area of aging and seniors. She has clinical, managerial, administrative, teaching, research, and policy experience. In 2015, Dr. Brake was awarded the Canadian Association of Social Workers Distinguished Service Award. Her past work, volunteer experience, education, personal involvement with family, and her role as Director, Seniors and Aging Division and Provincial Director of Adult Protection with the Government of Newfoundland and Labrador have prepared her to be the inaugural Seniors Advocate of Newfoundland and Labrador. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Brake.
Thank you very much, and welcome everyone. And before I start, I want to acknowledge that today is World Kindness Day. And many of you who've ever heard me speak before will recognize that one of the issues I have in terms of our society and growing older in our society is sometimes the challenges around people being kind. So today is World Kindness Day. So let's all be very kind to each other every day. I'm very pleased. Welcome and good morning to everyone. And I'm very pleased to see, if I lay this up there, I'll be okay, right? I won't mess up anything they were looking at. I'm very pleased to see participants from such a range of areas who are attending this session today. There's employees here, there's employers here, there's policymakers here, there are researchers here, there are seniors who are here, there are students who are here. I'm thinking they're students, but that could be my own, at least one, right? So that could be my own discriminatory attitude towards looking at somebody and thinking they could be a student. I'm hoping that today will bring us an accepted perspective, which will emerge where older workers are recognized as a growing and necessary resource in the workplace. And I think the time has come, from everything I've heard and read and researched, et cetera, the time has come for us to transition into a way of thinking that is less ageist and it's more benefiting of our society. But first of all, I want to share a little bit about you, about our office in terms of how it was created. The office was created through the Seniors Advocate Act. And on November 7th, as was mentioned, I was honored to be appointed as Newfoundland and Labrador's first seniors advocate. The role of the office is to identify, review, and analyze systemic issues related to seniors. Secondly, to work collaboratively, and collaboration is a very big word in my dictionary, with seniors organizations, service providers, and others to identify and address systemic issues related to seniors. And thirdly, to make recommendations to government and government agencies and others respecting changes to improve senior services. So that's basically my job description. The focus of the office is on systemic issues, which are those issues that are found in the overall system, rather than specific individual or isolated cases. And I get asked that question a lot. And we get a lot of calls, too, from individuals regarding individual issues. Our office we take all that information and we actually do help people to navigate what is obviously a very complex system at times. And, that's not our primary role. Our primary role is to address the bigger systemic issues that impact seniors. Our legislation identifies systemic issues under 5 broad categories: healthcare, personal care, housing, transportation, and finances. And there's no question, and we all recognize that these issues are fairly interrelated. One thing impacts another, impacts another, impacts another. And we also recognize that systemic issues can be incredibly complex, and responses cannot be addressed by any one person. They require individuals and organizations to work together, and this requires collaboration, cooperation, and communication. Almost immediately after my appointment, the phones began ringing. I can guarantee you the minute I walked into the office, the phones were ringing. And I was there all by myself because it was a brand new office. It was abundantly clear that seniors had a lot to say. And I was really anxious to hear them. So I decided to focus my attention on listening and learning. So far, I've participated in 59 networking and information sessions throughout our province, reaching out to about 2,500 people. Those are the ones we've counted anyway. And received calls and emails and letters and texts and you name it from about over 500 people. In addition, I've met with numerous service providers, as well as reviewed many reports, done many interviews, and examined research and stories in the media. Now, you have to remember, I've worked just about all of my career in the area of aging and seniors. So much of this was information I knew, and it reinforced what I knew, or it dispelled what I knew. Everything I have learned so far through this whole consultation process falls within 3 broad areas, and they are all described, and we have copies actually of our report here, and we called it was released in September, our first report, and it was called Long May Your Big Jib Draw. So the three areas which are described in the report are aging in place, which I think the concept, the term speaks for itself. People want to age in place, wherever that place may be. And there are many elements and ways of doing things that help support people to do that. Healthcare. Our bodies are but vessels, and we wear out. So our health is a major issue and concern for all of us. And the third one was labor force participation. Within the report, there are 11 specific concerns and 25 specific actions. And while all of these issues that were brought to my attention are important, some do require more immediate response, and others will require much longer time, because we all know that attitudes take a long time to change. More importantly, for today's purposes, seniors described to me a number of issues regarding their ability or inability to continue to be attached or reattached to the paid workforce. We all know that the cost of living continues to rise, that seniors who are living on fixed incomes, especially low-income seniors, continue to struggle. While some seniors retire and spend that stage of their lives quite contented with enough money to live their lives as they wish, like just talking to Dave Rostovsky, where are you, Dave? Who just came back from 3 months in Florida. That's okay. Like, some people can, though. Some people are in a position where they certainly do have that ability, but others cannot live that way. Some seniors cannot afford to retire. Others do not want to retire. For seniors who remain attached to the workforce, workplaces must become more age-friendly if we are to retain and recruit older workers. Myths and stereotypes about older workers must be busted. I'm not going to list them here, because to me that's just reinforcing those myths, is to say them out loud again. But they need to be busted in order for people to be accepted and for us to create welcoming work environments for all employees of all ages, because everybody has a place. It's not a contest. Everybody has a place there. We know for a fact that seniors are working well into their 70s, and that trend is expected to continue. It's not just happening in Newfoundland and Labrador, it's happening everywhere. But some workplaces do not offer accommodations to make the workplace comfortable and welcoming. Sometimes something as simple as a stool, which I should have asked for, by the way, because I do have a really bad back that's acting up right now. That's what I get for pushing a wheelbarrow full of dirt. That, anyway, was the stupidest thing. But, you know, sometimes a stool for comfort or part-time or shared hours can make a total difference in terms of welcoming an older worker into the workforce, but also having that extra experienced, knowledgeable person there to provide services for you as an employer. Some employees do not offer certain benefits upon reaching a certain age. Seniors have reported to me, and Mike, you're here, and we've talked about this many times, about losing your long-term disability, about losing health benefits and dental benefits just because you're 65 or you're 70. That's what it's based on, age. Although in our Human Rights Act, we clearly state that age is no longer a grounds for discrimination. There is a clause which will say, under certain circumstances, such as pensions and health benefits, then there are exclusions. In my report, I committed to partner with stakeholders to host a summit. Here we are today. We created a committee made of representatives. Thank you. Oh, thanks. That was pretty good, eh? Representatives from the Harris Center at Memorial University, from relevant government departments, from the Board of Trade, from Older Workers, Newfoundland and Labrador, and others. And our goal was to hold a first ever summit on older workers. And our goal today is to bring you all together as employees, employers, policymakers, and others to really explore the changing landscape of the workforce and how we can best move forward with this. In addition, I also have committed in my report that we will be examining age within the context of the Human Rights Act and its impact on pensions and retirement plans and insurance plans. That's one of the long-term plans, I suspect. It's not going to be an easy nut to crack. That one won't be. The next two speakers are going to focus on the demographics of a changing population, where greater numbers of people are available to participate in the paid workforce, as well, I might note, also who are participating, maybe in paid workforce, but also in volunteerism and providing care. I am one of those people. I am a carer for my husband who has frontotemporal dementia. So when you see me up here talking, you have to recognize that not only am I talking the talk, because I'm also walking the walk. And it's not easy. Anytime I meet a care provider now, I don't call them caregivers, because my father gave me a lecture on that term one time. He made a very clear point to a health professional who said, well, you know, Suzanne is your caregiver. And he said, last time I checked, she was my daughter. So it made me think about the power of language, too, and how we present things. So, and volunteerism, of course, as well, is a huge thing that many people participate in. But I just want to mention a few things before I end off and hand this over to others. It's important to note, though, that the interest in the area of older work participation has been on the radar for years. I mean, let's face it, we knew that the baby boomers, it was 1966, and we knew the baby boomers were going to be there, and yet, I'm not sure why, but we continued to pretend that this was not going to happen at some point in time down the road. And so I would suggest that in the past, considering older worker participation has been with lukewarm interest. But that is now growing. I also believe that there is a growing body of research in this specific area. Again, it's been not really all that much interest in it. There's a few people here who are interested in it, but that too is increasing as time goes on. But I'd also like to note that the media has portrayed seniors generally and workforce participation specifically in very negative light, focused on those myths and stereotypes that I'm not going to mention, and this is an ongoing challenge. It is. So as way of example, the federal, provincial, territorial ministers responsible for seniors and the National Seniors Council have been moving forward with better understanding the impact of an aging population from a labor force perspective for a number of years. They develop working groups and they've produced a wide range of materials. And you know what? I bet you any money, half the people in this room, maybe 3/4 of the people in this room aren't really aware of that. We have actually a representative from the FPT, the federal arm, Lee, who's here today. And thank you, Lee, for coming. And we have other representatives from provincial bodies, provincial government departments, etc. And there has been a number of different efforts made and initiatives in terms of trying to understand better what age-friendly workplaces are all about, what it's like to be a near senior or a senior, and what is the intergenerational impacts of all those kinds of things. So you should go online and look up some of those documents, because there's lots of information there. There's also lots of books, numerous books being written these days, and articles on aging, and from numerous perspectives, including the economy and workforce participation. And I'm currently reading an interesting book by Joseph Coughlin, who's the founder and director at MIT Age Lab. And that's an organization in the States that works with businesses, governments, and NGOs to improve the quality of life of older people and those who care for them. But it's also focused on the intersection between aging and business. The book is called The Longevity Economy. And early on in the book, he notes that although preparing for an aging population should be extremely high on every company and every organization's long-term priority list, that with few exceptions, companies and not-for-profits and governments are just not getting ready, and that this is a real mystery to MIT. Well, what an interesting thought. The Auditor General here in Newfoundland, almost 3 years ago now, completed an audit on what is government's preparedness for an aging population. And, excuse me, and overall, the AG felt that we are not prepared. So has tasked government departments and agencies to do just that, to become a more prepared province for an aging population. Now, when I say the word aging population, sometimes very negative thoughts and perspectives jump into people's minds. Oh yeah, they're gobbling up all the healthcare resources, we're gonna have to pay for them, yum, 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 yum. You know, that's how I look at that. But, you know, it's a really interesting thing that we all need to work together to try to determine how we can best move forward with an inclusive and welcoming environment for all people, every single person in our province, from birth to death. The AG is expecting a report back here in Newfoundland and Labrador in 2020. So here we are. In January, it's 2020. So the fall of 2020 is when that report is expected. Researchers are becoming more engaged and interested. I noticed that we have Drs. Lan Jen and Stephen Bornstein here today, and there was a couple others who were involved in a study that was done to understand how and why people participate in the workforce. So that's a piece of information about Newfoundland and Labrador. The subjects were from Newfoundland and Labrador, and the research was. I'm not going to get into all kinds of research here today. And a recent Stats Canada report in July of 2019, which actually used 2016 data, noted that as the population ages, so does our workforce. Well, we all know that. In fact, from 96 to 2018, the proportion of workers age 55 and older increased from 10 to 21%. Of those workers, the share of women is lower, and this reflects women's more recent entry into certain occupations. And people who provide health care, surprise, surprise, which is a growing industry, are themselves aging. So there's some challenges that we have there. Also, there is a below average increase in the number of older workers in computer and information systems and advertising, marketing, and public relations. Hence, okay, boomers, we got to listen to that. We know that we're not all that engaged or involved. Last Wednesday, when I was driving home, I was listening. I live an hour away in Cupid's, and so I get an hour of listening to the radio on my way home. And I was listening to Ted Blades on CBC, and he was interviewing economist Bruce Sellery, who's a personal finance columnist. And the topic he had chose to talk about last Wednesday was on seniors opting to stay in the workforce. I will note that I thought Ted was a little skeptical. I wasn't all that pleased with his attitude during that interview. Because you know what? He's an older worker. Anyway, the topic was about them staying in the workforce, us seniors. He noted that many seniors want to stay in the workforce due to financial necessity, and that's true, while others just want to work. He also noted that studies from Harvard and from the London School of Economics report that working activates the brain, it socially includes people, and it impacts physical well-being. Now that's the research is telling us that. He also noted that financial benefits, including supplementing very basic needs, such as food and heat, are very real. But also, some people want to work to allow for extras in life, such as trips and those kinds of extra things. And also, some work to try to make their little nest egg last longer. So sometimes we have money put away, and we say this money will help us in our retirement, and contribute to us being able to support ourselves as we grow older. And sometimes having that little bit of extra money helps that as well. So there's many reasons why people want to continue to work. So, in summary, my goal today is to set the stage, to offer to you some of the current perspectives regarding labor force participation and older workers. I'm really excited and eager to hear our speakers who are here today, and then listen to the discussions later this morning and this afternoon, which is using an approach called strategic doing. And really, that's all about thinking outside the box in today and into the future, and we can all benefit from that. So thank you very much, and I look forward to moving around the room and hearing what people have to say. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Suzanne. I would now like to introduce Dr. Lynn Gambon. Dr. Gambon is an associate professor in the economics department at Memorial University. She did her undergraduate and master's degrees at Memorial University and acquired her PhD at the University of York, England. In the UK, she jointly led a program of research on apprenticeships, training and skills, and more for more than 10 years, and she continues to carry out research in those areas. Dr. Gambon has research interests in a number of areas of economics, including labor, education, and health, as well as public policy and program evaluation. At Memorial, she also serves as the editor of the CARE Labor Market Observer and is coordinator of the Economics Cooperative Education Program. Over to you, Lynn.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm really happy to be here. I'm thankful for the Harris Centre inviting me, asking me to speak, and I hope I can kind of do justice to the topic. So I'm going to present a lot of tables and graphs, so forgive me for that. I'll try to talk to them as much as I can while talking to you at the same time. But really, my intention is to give a bit of a snapshot of what the Newfoundland and Labrador labour market looks like, and how it's broken down a little bit by different age groups. So I just wanted to say a little bit about myself. I returned or came back to MUN as a faculty member in 2016. So I've been here for over 3 years now. Getting to grips with policy again, although I tried to keep my eye on it. There was a lot of things going on in Britain when I was there, and still is, that diverted my attention. But since coming back, I've taken over the Collaborative Applied Research in Economics, their Labour Market Observer. I've become the editor of that. So I have a student that tries to do it's not her fault that we don't get it out on a regular basis, but we try to look at the labour market on an ongoing basis and highlight some of the trends and some of the interesting things that are coming out of our province. And often we do focus on age. And I have to say that having a post-secondary student, an undergraduate student currently working on that, kind of makes us look at the younger demographics a lot more. So we look at unemployment rates a lot for the youth cohort. So for the youth age 15 to 24 is one of our big focuses. But I think today's presentation that I have really slants it towards the older demographics, which are an increasing group in our province across Canada, and of course deserve just as much attention, if not more. So I'm going to present the latest data that I could get a hold of, which is largely October 2019 from the Labour Force Survey, the Canadian Labour Force Survey. I'm going to look a little bit at trends, not a lot. I thought we'd just look at a picture of today, really. And I just wanted to make a few comments at the end about, so what does it all mean? And what really, I think importantly, I am an economist and tend to be a quantitative one at heart, but I think qualitative information is really important to get a full picture of what's going on and how the aging demographics can actually be beneficial to us, to our labour market and our economy as a whole. Yeah, I should have said all of this. I think I've said most of it. I am a different type of economist, I think, than many economists that I've encountered over the years, and I don't think I'm better, but I have a particular love of policy and practicality, and that's come about a lot through my research in the United Kingdom and working with European partners as well, that it's important to engage stakeholders at every level, individuals, workers, unemployed people, policymakers, politicians, and anyone you can get a hold of that can actually drive messages home and do something about it. So I wanted to state that up front as well. Okay, so you have to excuse me, I woke up with a cold. The Canadian Labour Force Survey is the only data set that I've pull out numbers from for today. If it's monthly or if it's a snapshot of data, it's going to be October 2019. And if I've got annual there, it's going to go up to 2018, which is the latest full year data available, freely available. Some of the figures have been adjusted for seasonality, others haven't. And I just wanted to say that because if you see differences in some of the totals, that's going to be part of where that comes from. Just some caveats. So this is annual participation rates by age group. So the percentage of each age group that is up for work. They're either employed or unemployed. So the question being that they have to be looking for work if they're not already engaged in work. And we can see that in Canada, participation rates are relatively high for what we call the core working age population, 25 to 54 years of age. That's up almost to 90%. Hasn't been a huge increase in that since 1998 up to 2018. But we do see some of the older age groups have a slight, well, this is quite an obvious one really, increasing trend over time. So we're getting higher participation rates for the older segments of our population across Canada as a whole. Newfoundland and Labrador, consistently we have lower participation rates across pretty much any demographic group that you look at. Our core working age group has about 84% participation rate, which is low compared to the 87. It's a bit lower than the national average. And that is the group that you have the highest participation rate. That's the group 25 to 54 years old, years of age, have largely finished their full-time education and the training. They've entered the labour market and they're probably going to be in there for a while. So the core working age population is the group where you don't expect to see low participation. We've got some of the increasing trends as well in our older age groups, 55 to 59, 60 to 64 in the green, and the red is 65 to 69. You'll notice on the grey line, we've got smaller numbers, smaller cell sizes in that data. So there's some breaks in that information there from 1999 to 2003, where the data wasn't reliable or large enough to provide a reliable estimate. But we can see it's going up. Our numbers for each and every age group there are lower. Our participation rates tend to be lower than Canadian averages. Now, that's the only bit of Canadian data I'm going to put up. I just think it's important to say that our labour market is structured in that way, or our participation looks lower than it does across the rest of Canada for a variety of reasons that I don't even know, all of them. But I wanted to highlight that. But I think the rest of my presentation really dives into to our province. So that's I've eliminated the 15 to 24-year-old age group for this. Often for our labour market statistics, we'll see 15 plus as our labour market and our definition of adults. I wanted to get rid of that group at the moment because that group has a lot of noise in it, where people are in and out of full-time education and training. So 25 plus is the age where people tend to go into the labour market, and like I said before, they'll kind of stay there if they can. So we can see this, just looking at the unemployment rate, focusing down here, unemployment rate, participation rate, and the employment rate. Our employment rate for 25 years of age and older is, our participation rate is only 58.1%, unemployment rate 9.3%, which is, when we strip out that lower age group, some of our 15 plus unemployment rate is somewhere around 12 to 15%, depending on what month we're looking at. But this kind of 25 plus takes out some of that noise and some of the more volatile parts of the labour force. 25 to 50 years of age, that's our core working age population. And just like we would see anywhere else in Canada, that's going to have the lowest unemployment rate, highest participation rate as well. And then trying to look at some of the different age groups. So 55 plus, if we can define that, and I've put that one in separately because in some of the other graphs that you'll see with more detail, 55 plus is the most fine-grained, widely publicly available data that you can get from the Labour Force Survey. A lot of that is to do with the size of our population, Newfoundland and Labrador being small, so it's not reliable to break it down by too many cross-cuts of the data. There you can see the unemployment rate is higher for older workers. The participation rate is much lower. That's bringing in even the 70 plus, which drags the full number down for 55 plus. And this is a bit more fine-grained for some of these headline figures. So unemployment, 14% in the 55 to 59 group, 12 a bit lower for 60 to 64, and lower again for 65 to 70. There's no reliable estimate for the 70 plus. And that's what we'd expect, given that as people get older, they're less likely to report that they're in the labour market in the first place. And accordingly, the participation rates go down. Okay. And that's kind of just another take of the data. So I can make the slides available to anyone that wants them, so you can look at the data a little bit more. One thing I wanted to point out on this is differences in part-time versus full-time work. So this is the percentage in our labour, in the employment group of age 25 plus, it's almost 90% full-time workers. That's even higher for the core working age population. But you see that when you get to 65 plus, that starts to go down. So the proportion of part-time work goes up as people get older, as we look at older working groups. Yes, yep.
Just 1 second. I'm going to get you a mic so people online.
Okay.
Thank you very much. My question is that these, for example, 65 to 69 years, 38,200 of the population, are these people who have made it clear that they want to work?
The population is just the estimated number of all people of that age group. If they're in the labour force, they've said that they're either working or they're seeking work and are unemployed. They're not. If someone reports that they're retired, they're not in the labour market. If they're in full-time education, they wouldn't be considered.
So, as you've said, they either intend to work or wish to work.
Yeah.
And so, therefore, the unemployment rate is applicable to that particular group of people in that class.
That's right. The unemployment rate is out of the labour force, not out of the population.
Thanks very much.
Yeah. Good question. Okay. All right. This is the breakdown. So each of these lines is 100%. Just the breakdown, so we can look at it right away and see that 50% of the population in Newfoundland and Labrador, of the population 25 and older, 50% of that group is 55 years of age and older. So I'm thinking adults defined as 25 years of age and older. Half of the adults in our province are over 55 or 55 and older. In our labour force, almost a quarter, or just over a quarter, are 55 plus. People who are employed is a very similar, slightly smaller percentage of employed people. Employed adults are age 55 and over, and unemployed almost a third. Over a third are unemployed. Of our unemployed are 55 and older. Not in the labour force. Not surprising that 25 to 54-year-olds make up the smallest proportion of people outside the labour force. So older people who are out of the labour force, we often would make the quick assumption that they're just retired, that they've left the labour market because they've had enough of working. That's not always the case. I'm sure I know many people who have left the labour force due to health reasons, due to full-time caring requirements that they have to provide for a loved one or a family member or friend, and lots of other reasons that they might have left the labour force and not be seeking work. Not just simply a decision that they've decided to retire. Now, one thing that I find is missing in the data, because the labour force survey is a cross-section of Canadians at any given point in time. One thing that we miss is people moving in and out of these labour market categories, or participation or not. So what I would find really interesting from a research standpoint is being able to look at people who are maybe on the edge of what we consider the retirement age for people, when they might decide to go back into the labour force and why they would do that. And so like we heard earlier from Susan about what do they get from work? Why would you want to work after working for 50, 60 years before anyway? So these numbers don't tell full stories. This is just level of employment for males and females, and then broken down into each group. For our core working age population, it's about 50-50, and it tends to be about that. It starts to decrease as we get into the older age groups. And 65 to 69 is where there's a greater imbalance, the greatest imbalance in the data currently. So 37% of 65 to 69-year-olds who are employed are female compared to almost 2/3 who are men. That could have something to do just with the current cohort that we observe in this age group, that they're still kind of sticking to the somewhat earlier retirement for women that we tend to see in the labour market. And by 65, it's mostly men who are left there. But it reverts back a little bit here, which would also reflect our demographic and the population numbers by sex for 70 and older. This is our labour force rather than employment numbers. So the previous table was employment. This is labour force, and it's similar kind of pattern going on there. Now, I've given you this table already, so I won't go over that. This is where the data starts to get a little bit patchier and harder to really dig down and see where older workers are located in our labour market. So the percentages here, they don't add up exactly to 100 because some of them are kind of double counting, where we see breaks, like breaking down retail and wholesale trade into those two separate categories. I've tried to highlight here just a few things. We've got similar proportions of employment for the core working age population and the older worker group in the goods producing sector, and 3/4 of workers or employment in the province is in services. We see that some of the highest areas or the largest groups for largest employment numbers are in things like healthcare and social assistance, educational services, but that tends to be somewhere where it's a relatively more important area of employment for the core working age population than for the older workers. And public administration being another one. So like I said, utilities is a very small group, so we can't really break that down by age as well as we can some of the other bigger employment areas. As Susan mentioned earlier, we do have an aging workforce in the healthcare sector, and that's a concern too. I think that brings some good things with it in that if we're dealing with patients who are in older age groups, that people who are in similar age groups probably can empathize and understand things a little bit better than a brand new workforce in that area. Yep.
To ask you with this funny device. How do you define utilities? Because the number seems rather low for me.
It is utilities that's defined by the national classifications that Statistics Canada has. So I can't off the top of my head. That would be electricity, hydroelectric, and things like that. Off the top of my head, I don't know exactly what it includes, but energy generation, things like that, water services, all of that. Yeah, but that is a very small. I mean, I know when we look at kind of energy generation, it's right in the forefront of our minds in this province because we have some issues going on in that industry, but it's not a huge employment driver at the moment. No. Okay, I'm taking a little bit longer than I anticipated, sorry. And that's just a breakdown of, so employment within each of those industry classifications, how it looks in terms of age. So other services, except public services, which is, I know, is a kind of weird definition of an industry, has the highest percentage of 55-year-old and older workers in it. And we see down in professional, scientific, and technical services, the lowest percentage. Only 14% of workers or of employment in that area is held by people 55 years of age and older. Retail is one where it's where is it? Let me see. Retail is one where we've got a high 2/3 to 1/3 co-working age versus 55 plus. Okay, another thing I just wanted to point out, I'll just go through these a little bit quicker. This is just a breakdown by the type of contract held by people who are employed. by different age groups. And what you see is there's more temporary work amongst older workers. Permanent employment is lower. That could be for a multitude of reasons as well. It might be that those people have kind of shifted away from the career that they might have come through throughout their working lives. They might be taking on something different. But again, the data, this kind of high-level aggregate data won't tell you that story. Why are people more likely to be on a temporary contract? Do they want to work in that way? Do they want to work part-time? Do they want to work on a casual basis? Or is it that that's the only thing available to them? And finally, educational attainment by age group. So not surprisingly, the younger cohort has higher levels of educational attainment when we measure it by formal education achievement. That's been changing over time, and if we look at this in another 20 years, we'll see that it's spread out a bit differently. So we have much higher participation in post-secondary education than we used to, and that's reflected quite clearly in the employment and labour force numbers as well. One thing that I couldn't get good data on was occupations, and I think occupational information is really important to see what types of jobs people are in. Is it in the low-skilled areas? Is it in management or something else? And I think occupational information alongside industry-level information is really important to get a good understanding of how the labour market's working and people's experiences of it. Just a couple of things. My background tends to be, I've done a lot of research on apprenticeship and vocational education and training in Europe and in England in particular. One thing coming out of the research on training and on the job training and employer-provided training is that people who have lower levels of education, like some of our older workers from the data before, and also older workers in general, tend to receive less employer-provided training. So that can reduce the chances of them having a prosperous working life for the time that they remain in the labour force. In an area like Newfoundland and Labrador, we have a lot of structural changes going on in our economy, a move from resource-based industries to hopefully to more high-tech, more intellectual or knowledge-based economies. That's really important to ensure that there's education and training opportunities for people to fulfill those requirements of the labour force that are up and coming. So that's the last thing I want to say. Unfortunately, like I said, large-scale surveys like the labour force survey in Canada don't give us the fine-grained information that we might want to have. So I think a mixed methods approach where we have qualitative information and looking at exactly why people make the decisions they do as they age to either continue working, change their career, or what else they have going on in their lives would really help tell the story and help meet the needs of older workers as well. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Lynn. I am a person who's avoided math since high school and numbers, and somehow find myself in a job where I have to help put together vital signs every year. And I'm fast becoming a numbers nerd, and I think it's because of numbers like the ones Lynn just presented. They really tell a story, and so I'm really glad you were able to bring those here today and kind of expand our knowledge about the story that those numbers tell. I'm going to pass it over to Rhonda Tulk-Lane with the Board of Trade now to introduce the next speaker and let us know a little bit about a research project that the Board of Trade has undertaken.
Good morning, everyone. I'm glad to be here. So nice to see some familiar faces and all kinds of new faces. We've been very lucky this year. We received a research grant from the Newfoundland and Labrador Workforce Innovation Centre to study the opportunities and barriers, then opportunities for workforce participation with experienced workers, older workers. So we're really excited. We've just started. It's a two-year project, so we'll be doing our research in partnership with MQO Research. And then we're going to start debunking the myths and really talking positively about all the energy and experience we have in our older workforce. So we're really, really excited about this project, and I was proud to be a part of the team to put this summit together. So we're excited. So thank you to the Workforce Innovation Center, as we call them. I like to call them the NL Wicked, because you're wicked good. So it's my pleasure to introduce you to Stephen Moore. Stephen has more than 10 years of experience advising senior leaders in both private and public sectors. With MQO Research, he works on projects on public policy, public affairs, and public relations. His political research was featured by media in the United States, the Globe and Mail, the Toronto Star, and in many local and regional publications. His experience also includes advising provincial governments in Atlantic Canada on matters ranging from environmental issues to labor relations. And hopefully, Stephen will be able to add advising them on the experienced workforce and what we're going to do with them and turn this ship around. Before joining MQO Research, he worked for Nova Scotia Premier Stephen McNeil as his Director of Communications. While working for Premier McNeil, he was part of the Nova Scotia Working Group overseeing cannabis legislation. He conducted research used for the province's carbon pricing model and was heavily involved in all matters relating to labor relations. So I'd ask Stephen to join me up here, and he's going to tell you a little bit about what we've learned so far in our research. We're very early on, but I think we've got some little nuggets to share with you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you for inviting me to speak today. It is a great pleasure to be here. My father's family actually comes from Rose Blanche, and I don't get to come here nearly enough, so it's yet another reason I'm really grateful for the opportunity to get to come and speak. I still have all sorts of family kicking around. So I hope what we're going to share with you today is useful and practical, but like I said, it is just a start. We have some tidbits that we'll be able to share, and please feel free to ask any questions should you have them as we move through the information. We place a lot of importance in someone's age, but in reality, it's a number. It doesn't reflect what they're capable of, what they're able to do, or really what they've done. Now, Nelson Mandela was elected president at 75. The oldest woman to climb Mount Everest was 73. Jessica Tandy won the Best Actress nomination, or Best Actress award at age 80. A guy I know in Nova Scotia who I met while working on the SHIFT strategy, which is the action plan that Nova Scotia put together, targeting older workers to help them out. His name is Ron Allen. He was in the World Triathlon competition at the age of 71. I got winded walking up a flight of stairs a couple of days ago, so that kind of puts me to shame. But it's an important conversation, and people are capable of really incredible things no matter how old they are. And it's this conference, this discussion is important because we really need to start operating the economy with that understanding. It's important to do it because demographic change is happening, and it's not just in Newfoundland and Labrador or Nova Scotia or Atlantic Canada. It's really a problem for many developed countries, developed economies. And there are several policy tools that governments traditionally turn to, whether it's trying to make people, make the economy more productive and investing in innovation and research and development, whether it's attracting more immigrants to grow the population. Also, though, attention is rightly and increasingly turning to interest in helping people work longer or get back into the workforce if they've left the workforce. And so it's that final one we're here to talk about today. And the quote up here is from 2008 from the OECD. So the need has grown even more pressing to have these conversations and start these ever important discussions. And they said over the next 50 years, all OECD countries will experience a steep increase in the share of elderly persons, older workers in the population, and a decline in the share of the population of prime working age. This is a very old quote at this point. But again, it shows that this is not just an isolated challenge that you're facing, that we face in Nova Scotia, or that even Canada faces. We are engaged in a research project, as Rhonda said, and what we've done so far for the research project is we have conducted a telephone survey with 400 residents of Newfoundland and Labrador. We have run a focus group with a series of older workers. And we have conducted some background research to look at what other places are doing to better and more effectively engage older workers who are looking to stay attached or to reattach to the workforce. When speaking to 400 residents here, we found that 34% of those over 55 reported that they had a paying job. And so really what that means is that 66% of people over the age of 55 reported that they don't have paying work. That's a large pool of people that has a lot of talent, a lot of experience, and a lot of knowledge that is not currently being used. In fact, 92% of people over the age of 55 who had not had a paying job said they haven't looked for work in the last 2 years. And that's an even bigger challenge and an even bigger problem. It's easy to assume that this group of people simply doesn't want to work. But that's a mistake. These opinions, the choices that people are making when they choose not to go and look for work, they're informed by a lifetime of experience, whether it's encountering age-based discrimination, whether it's getting frustrated with upskilling their skills or their knowledge, or whether it's technological challenge. There are a whole host of things. And so we went out, and when we spoke to 400 people, we said, well, why? If you're not looking for work, why aren't you looking for work? The first group said they don't need or want to work, and good for them. If you don't need to work, that's 47% of those over the age of 55. The second group, 33%, simply stated they were retired. And we see some other things down here. People have noted health issues or simply that they believe they're too old. But there's, I think, a big distinction between those who say they don't need or want to work and those who simply state that they are retired. It's a subtle difference, but it's one that's important. You can be retired and still want to work. And that's also, as the previous speaker said, anybody who considers themselves retired aren't counted in certain statistics. And so we wanted to make sure we were really able to keep drilling down into this group of the population to continue understanding their interest, the opinions driving their beliefs and their actions. And so we asked them, we said, if you were to receive an appealing job offer, would you accept it? And 29% of people over 55 would accept an appealing job offer if they received one. And this is the group who's currently not working. So 29%, nearly 30% of those over 55 who are not working would accept an appealing job offer if they received one. So right now, or at least according to the 2016 census, 148,000 people lived here between the age of 55 and 75. 29% is roughly 44,000 people. That's 44,000 workers who would accept a job if they received an offer that they thought was attractive. That's a lot of people. That's a lot of skill. It's a lot of knowledge. It's a lot of life experience. And the question is, how do we engage this group of the population? Sure, if you don't need to work, that's great and kudos to you. But if you are retired and really want to work for financial reasons, for the quality of life benefits that come from it, that's what we really need to focus on. And so part of what we did, whether through focus groups or through the secondary research we conducted, further digging into what can we do to make job offers appealing and practical to older workers, and that's what we're going to take a look at in the next section, is how do we support older workers and thereby grow the workforce? Well, mostly, not to oversimplify it, but you can grow the workforce by removing barriers and increasing retirement choices. And we really found 5 different actions that either governments or companies are taking around the world in different jurisdictions that are being effective at really retaining or helping older workers reattach to the workforce. The first one is providing flexible work arrangements. And PwC releases this thing they call the Golden Age Index every year. And in 2018, this was a quote, and I thought it was an important quote. Older workers tend to have caring responsibilities, be it for spouses, grandchildren, or other family members, to accommodate. Working later in life, employers should consider offering flexible working arrangements which allow, for example, part-time or flexible hours and work from home. And we heard that a lot in the focus groups. If you're 55, you could still be caring for a child and for a parent at the same time, and that adds a lot of stress and that adds a lot of challenges, and there are very practical considerations that you have to have in mind when you're trying to reach out to that group of the population. And so providing the flexibility that older workers need is beneficial because it helps with that practical consideration. One of the things the literature, though, we also saw said that older workers carry a wage premium because they've been working longer. So on an hourly basis or an annual basis, it can cost more to hire an older worker than a younger worker. And there aren't always subsidies or programs from government to help offset that cost. And so that's yet again another one of the benefits of providing, say, part-time options or more flexible options to older workers, is that can help counteract the wage premium that they can pay. So you're not going to be paying for a full-time person. That person gets to attach to the company. You get their knowledge, their skills, their experience, and they help your company, they help your nonprofit, they help your government in whatever way they can. The second one is, again, something that was mentioned previously, as well as investing in skills and jobs training. This was this is from a report that was a follow-up to the 2008 OECD report, and it said, the quote was useful. It said, "It seems that neither employers nor their older workers see great benefits from investing much in training to upgrade skills." One of the things is that it is very important to provide programs and training opportunities, but we also have to encourage those people. If you're an employer, you really need to encourage your employees about taking the step to engage in those training. Oftentimes, you can think that if we build it, they'll come, and that's not always the case. In Nova Scotia, at one point, we were looking at how we make the province's economy more productive and what incentive programs the Department of Finance needed to put in place to help make companies more productive. Well, what they found was there was a cultural challenge. You can give them access to capital, you can give them access to skills training, but people really want to have to use it. And so encouraging, in this instance, a culture of lifelong learning, placing value on that, is crucially important as we start working down this road. And if you're encouraging a culture of lifelong learning, at the same time you're providing incentives to help with training, whether it's making it more accessible or more affordable, those two things combined can really produce dramatic results, and it's something that we're seeing elsewhere. Improving employment services. Again, older workers have a series of unique both barriers that they face and challenges that they can face when trying to reattach to the workforce. Providing things like peer mentoring is hugely beneficial if you have an older worker trying to re-enter the workforce after being laid off. Providing community-based work experience, so there's not long travel requirements needed, so that people can get practical experience for a new type of job in the community they're based. Helping with job matching where possible. Networks change over time, and I know, as much as there's job boards, oftentimes many jobs go without being posted. So if you're able to job match, mentor, be proactive in seeking out connections for older workers trying to reattach to the workforce, that is very, very helpful as well. And things like job shadowing are also beneficial as people are trying to gain new skills or new knowledge in a type of job that they may not have had previously. So improving employment services are particularly important. The fourth one that we saw in many places is probably the most controversial one on the list. It's pension reform. Pensions are, of course, an important part of the social safety net, but people are living longer, are able to work longer, and in many places in different parts of the world, governments are saying we're going to change how the pension system works. The general approach is either reducing public benefits or raising the pensionable age. There are lots of different approaches we can take, but that's kind of the range that they fall into. Either way, pensions are a factor in some people's decisions about whether or not they will retire, and they can pull people out of the labor force and into retirement if the situation is right. Again, it is a very sensitive political topic. It is a very hard thing to navigate, but it is one of those things we saw many jurisdictions in other parts of the world taking a strong look at. And finally, combating age-based discrimination. Many jurisdictions have in place anti-age discrimination laws. Many jurisdictions are reinforcing or strengthening those laws. But again, what we're seeing is that having the law on the books on its own is not enough. And in Nova Scotia, when we launched the Shift campaign, we launched a marketing campaign that supported it. And it was something that was designed to inform people and educate people about the value that exists, because combating discrimination involves sharing information and making sure people are educated the best way they can be. And then finally, supporting employers is important. Providing education to employers about the services that exist that help older workers attach, about the programs that exist that can do it, about the skills, about the challenges, about the needs. It's not just enough to put the legislation in place and try to forget about it. But we need, and the jurisdictions who've had the best luck combating age-based discrimination have taken this threefold approach, and we've seen that other places are now taking that on as well. Ultimately, we see that there are a large number of people in Newfoundland and Labrador over the age of 55 who are willing to work if they had a job. 44,000 people. That's a lot. Whether it's providing more flexible work arrangements, whether it's providing better jobs training. One of the things that I found interesting is in the focus groups we conducted, we said, yeah, it's great if you provide jobs training, but our employers make us do it electronically on a computer, and I'm not that great at that. And so, having a very careful qualitative understanding of some of those challenges that exist are very important. So Flexible arrangements, job training, lifelong learning, these are all things that are important as we're trying to engage with older workers who we want to keep working or people who are trying to get back to the workforce. And ultimately, there's a great phrase last night at the event. We all need to be contagious examples. And I think that that's ultimately what it comes down to. If you're here in your employer, lead by example. If you're a government department, lead by example. These are the things that are important, and that's how we start this change happening and getting bigger. It will snowball over time. So we've only been engaged at this now for about a month. So this is preliminary data from both the telephone survey, the focus groups, and the secondary research we've been conducting. But I do believe there's some interesting tidbits here. And again, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Stephen. And thanks also to Rhonda for bringing that to the group today. We are running a little bit behind, but we're going to try and pick up the pace a little bit. So we're going to move into the panel discussion for now. So the panelists, I'm scanning for you. I see a few. You know who you are. As I introduce you, you can come on up and have a seat on the couch here. We've got some handheld mics there, so you don't need to get rigged up or anything. Mike Keogh is one of the founding members of Older Workers NL and one of the key people involved in bringing this issue to the forefront here today and bringing us all here together. Mike has close to 50 years experience in management and ownership roles in the private and government sectors. Jean Graham, another key member of the Older Workers NL group. Jean has worked in and around communications in St. John's for 35 years, holding positions in private media, post-secondary education, government, and nonprofit, in addition to a wide-ranging freelance career. She has volunteered with many community organizations, including a decade or so with the Human Rights Association of Newfoundland and Labrador. Both Mike and Jean bring with them a wealth of experience and have very graciously agreed to share some of their personal experiences and insights with us today. Kelly Mansell brings an employer's perspective as one of the owners and operators of Rocket Bakery and Fresh Foods on Water Street, as well as Baby Rocket in Churchill Square, and as of last week, the Rocket's third location in Mount Pearl. So she's a very busy lady, and we're very grateful that she's here. She also has a whole lot of other worldwide experience in public relations and marketing, as well as business ownership that she brings to the table. And of course, Dr. Suzanne Brake. We'll ask you to come up too. I don't know, this might be news to you that you're sitting on the panel. You're looking at me rather surprised. You'll be fine. And I'd also like to take this opportunity to introduce my colleague, Boyan, first. Boyan is the Harris Center's manager of knowledge mobilization, as well as the host, creator, and producer of the Harris Center's podcast, Rural Roots. Boyan has agreed to moderate the panel discussion for us today. So over to you. Do you want a stool maybe? Or do you want to moderate from up here? Okay.
I'll moderate from here. Perfect. Hi. Good morning, everybody. We are a little bit behind the time, so I'm going to skip the preliminaries, and we are going to go straight to a couple of questions. The way this is going to work, I have a couple of questions for each of our panelists, and then we'll open it to the floor, and I'll do my best to close it as close to the time we promised we will as we can. Okay, so maybe Jean, we can start with you because we haven't heard from you yet. Would you mind sharing your experience as an older worker?
Okay.
Yep, you're on, I think.
We're on? Okay. I'm 60, just turned 60 this summer, and I work. First, I should say that my own experience has been just fine. Last year, I had decided I should look for a job, and like that, a job that looked appealing showed up in my inbox, and I thought, oh, I'll apply for that, and I got it. So I'm lucky, but I work in a field. Suzanne, you mentioned, I think earlier, about marketing and where older workers are underrepresented. The joke among people my age is like, oh yeah, let's hire a millennial, because of course what we do is it's all social media, so the assumption is that if you haven't grown up immersing yourself and putting your life out there on social media, then you can't communicate. But a very wise man said last night at the Mile One Center that it's yes, Twitter helped him get elected, but there's no replacement for communications. So my own experience has been fine, but I do know that at one point I didn't get a job because they said to me, we're looking for someone who's more into social media. Social media had not actually come up in the interview much, and I had answered well. But in my industry, it's very much a trend, a belief that if you're not younger, so yeah, we see a lot of ageism in marketing. So.
Mike, we heard quite a few presentations. We heard a lot of data. You have been an advocate for older workers in the province for quite some time now. How does everything you heard today resonate? And what are some of the challenges that you see?
Well, is this on?
Yes, it
I
is.
call my granddaughter if it's not on to get it fixed. It's a lot of what it has been like and what it's like now. But unfortunately, I didn't hear, maybe it's because I've had a bit of a mathematical bypass in me as well, of what it's going to be like, a whole lot of what it's going to be like. Older Workers Newfoundland and Labrador started a couple of years ago, and what motivated it was I had my employer. I have a great employer. I love going to work every day. I'm very fortunate. I love my work, my co-workers. I have about 300 of them, and I'm the first in there an hour early, and I bring in the donuts and all kinds of stuff. I love it. So this is not a reflection on my employer. But my employer's insurer, group insurer, dropped me at age 65. I'm 70 now. At age 65, from short and long-term disability coverage and from my life insurance, went from 2.5 times the value of my insurance down to a flat rate of $10,000. They forgot to tell me about it until 2 years later. Then at age 70, in August of this year, I lost all benefit coverage. So I lost medical, dental, vision, everything. But only because I'm age 70. I'm as in good a shape as many of them I co-work with. And I find myself sitting in a building of about 200 to 300, closer to 300 employees, the only one without benefit coverage, unless there's somebody there, I'm not aware of them, who may have them from outside for, you know. So the motivation was, you know, this is so unfair. I want to keep working. My motivations for work are a lot like other people. First of all, I'm very fortunate. I love work. But secondly is I have 2 dogs to pay for, vet bills. You still look after children. They're always a part of your life, and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. And you want to leave equity, and it keeps you healthy. So a lot of what's gone on has been a lot of research in the last couple of years and meeting, and thanks to Dr. Brake for inviting us here today. Rhonda Tucklane, the St. John's Board of Trade. Wow, you're a champion, you're a fantastic person. And others, Newfoundland Labrador Workforce Innovation Center. I call them a can of glue. They bring it all together. They bring so much together. They're fantastic. So I'm here because I think that there's a lot of survivor guilt amongst older workers. And I think some of the numbers that Mr. Power gave out there earlier, that the truth be known is they've been convinced many of the workers really want or need to work. Those who choose not to work, I'm happy for them. That's okay, no issue there. But I think many want to work. But I think they got this feeling, it's like there's something wrong with me. Aren't I supposed to be retired at age 55 or 60? And I get this undercurrent into place. So there's so much more about it because we have such limited time. We started prodding into these areas, and it's brought some exciting things to hear today. So we're canaries in a mine of sorts, but we're canaries that are going to survive. And as this issue grows, I think this type of group will grow. Thanks. Yep. Okay.
Thank you. Kelly, let's switch this conversation around a little bit from the employer's perspective. What are some of the challenges that you face in hiring older workers and working with older workers?
Hiring older workers?
Yeah.
Before you start, Kelly, I'm just going to remind the panelists in particular, hold your mic up close to your mouth, only because we're capturing it online, so it's not just for what's in the room, but we won't be able to hear the audio. And also, Boyan is recording this for the Rural Roots podcast, and he may use clips, so it's important to have consistent sound. So hold it up to the mic like you're a singer.
Thank you, Kat.
Well, I do have a challenge in hiring older workers, and that is they're not coming to me and asking or looking for a job. We have 4 generations of workers at Rocket. We have boomers, and that's me, my husband Mark, and our business partner Dave, plus one very valued employee, Gary Rumsey, who's in the bakery, and he came with the building, basically, he says, and it's true, but so we have also Gen Xers and Gen Zs and, you know, the whole gamut. We don't have anyone over 65, and most of those older workers are in the production area, the bakers and the cooks. It's down on the floor that we have the young people, and it's traditionally who we've hired are younger people, and those are the people that are applying for jobs to work at Rocket. And we sometimes joke that you know, we should be called Rocket Bakery and Fresh Food Educational Institute, because we train people, we train a lot of people, and it costs us a lot of money. And so the reason I'm interested in being, and I'm so grateful to be involved in this event today, is because we want to hire older workers, but we're having trouble finding them. And the reason is that, you know, younger workers that come to us are usually in school or just finishing school. They see working in the food and beverage industry as something temporary, a stepping stone to the real job, maybe. They're moving on, you know, within a year to travel the world or go back to their home province because they've been at MUN or whatever. So we train them, and then they leave for their own reasons. And that, like I say, that costs us a lot of money that we think we could put into to better use, like healthcare. We can't afford healthcare benefits yet, but if we weren't training people so much, that is something we would like to offer our employees. So we'd like to hire older workers for so many reasons. We'd like to tap into their, you know, their skills, experience, and so on. Like, for example, like when the toilet breaks, you know, that little chain thing that holds the flip thing, you know, most of us know, you lift up the lid and you either put it back or you see it's broken and you know, instead of just flapping the handle and saying, I guess it's broken, you know. And that kind of experience, it sounds so basic, but you have to teach all that kind of stuff to people for some reason. And my husband, Mark, you know, who's the sort of the physical plant guy, he's constantly going, what the heck, you know, like, how do people not know this? But it's something you have to remember, that people have to learn at once somewhere. Seems to be here at Rocket, you know. And we feel that, you know, older workers need less supervision and have that initiative that we really value. Taking initiative is something, man, you cannot teach. I don't think you're either born with it, or maybe you observe it and absorb it yourself and take initiative, and employers love that. And we think that with staff engagement, that maybe older workers will stick with us longer. And and something that is particular to Rocket maybe is that we feel older workers are receptacles for Newfoundland culture. And particularly down on Water Street, we find that you know, tourists in particular want to meet Newfoundlanders. And you may have heard me tell this story before, but you know, I love working on the floor. Like, it gives me a lot of energy talking to customers like Jean and Suzanne and Michael. And when tourists come in the door, at least initially, the first few years, you know, they would come in and they'd be like, okay, those ads have broken me down. I'm here. I've come to Newfoundland. And I'm like, oh, great, where are you from? Welcome. And they're like, oh, I'm from, you know, downtown Toronto. I'm like, I'm from Toronto too. Well, you know, and you could just see their faces drop. They're like, ugh, I've come all this way. I don't want to meet a Torontonian. I want to meet a Newfoundlander. And I get so much positive feedback when tourists in particular are in our dining room sitting next to a Newfoundlander, and getting, a history of the building or how we do things here, or, rent a car from my cousin down the street or whatever. People come away from that just feeling like they've had an experience. And that's what our Minister of Tourism is telling us to supply to our tourists, in particular, our experiences. And I feel that an older worker would offer that kind of experience and enhance tourism and help drive tourism, which I feel personally is going to be important to the future of our financial well-being here in the province. So I'm sorry, I can stop now.
I'm going to reverse my prepared questions a bit. I'm curious, do you have any understanding why older workers are not applying for those jobs? Like, did you have even anecdotal conversations?
Well, after the Obama event last night, I was talking to some friends who are also looking for older workers. My friends that own the Travel Bug and Bee's Knees downtown. They're looking for older workers too, and they're not getting anyone applying. And we were thinking about it, like, why is it that a great proportion of our community at Rocket is from the LGBTQ community, and they're the same. But it's not like we're going out purposely trying to hire from that community, but a huge portion of our community at Rocket is made up of people from that community. And we figure it's because when you walk into Rocket, that's what you see in terms of the workforce. You're able to, if I were a member of that community, I'd be able to walk in and see others reflected in the workforce. And so I'm thinking, you have to, I can see myself working there then. I can see myself participating in that community. So I'm going to apply for a job at Rocket. And I think, I've got my eyes on an older worker. I've almost snagged her. And I'm hoping, to get the party started by getting at least one worker on the floor that's obviously older than a university student. And I think once that happens, the ball gets rolling and we'll see more people coming to us. I am adjusting our want ads to say, we want people of all ages and all that kind of thing. But I think being able to see someone working at Rocket who is an older worker will really help.
Susan, you have a really interesting position. So you had these kinds of conversations all over the province. I am particularly interested, did you notice any difference in these conversations when we talk rural versus urban, or are the issues similar? Are there differences?
Well, I think that is a very interesting question. We heard it everywhere. Everywhere we went, people made comments around wanting, as I explained earlier, there were 3 major different areas. But in terms of workforce participation, people everywhere wanted to know how they could get back into the workforce, how they could continue to be attached. I think that the comment Mike made was reflective of the way that many older adults felt, and that was this sense that they weren't, and I'll put it in different words, Mike, that they weren't worthy, or they weren't really up on technology, or they weren't, somehow or another, they were being pushed aside. And the other part that we heard loud and clear was that people felt that they didn't want to be taking jobs away from younger people. So it's like, well, these younger people need the jobs, and we just don't, we'd like to work, we need to work, because we heard people very clearly say that our income is just not helping us meet our needs. And others were saying, I feel that my mind is not as alert or as bright, and I would love to continue to be in that paid workforce, et cetera, et cetera. So, I think there were more people from the urban centers who may have said that, but certainly we heard it throughout the province in different kinds of ways.
Okay. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Just so, because we can't tell, okay? Suzanne's right remarks are on, but I find as well that there are very few large employers who want to be out front on talking about hiring older workers. And it's almost to them, and I've spoken to a lot of them, met with a lot of them. I work with one of the largest in the province. But there's a tacit recognition that to do so would be, wow, we've spent 10, 15 years trying to sign up young people or immigrants or other different types of workers. And now to come out and to have any kind of a presence in seeking older workers. So there's almost like at the employer level, I love to hear Rocket. I think I'll apply for Rocket now, but I've lost all my benefits. Yeah, well, at this stage of my life, I still can at home. But I think the large employers have been reluctant to do so. Now, in my workplace, we've been able to change that. So a lot more and more people are coming in their 60s and that. They do great work because they mature, they show up, they're dependable, they're team players, they're motivated, they have dogs to pay for, they have children still being at home. They're all there, all the same thing. But we have barriers, technology in particular. It's like if you turn on the computer and it doesn't come on, it's like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, what am I going to do? Because we've had no training. And so far, my experience with employers and in interviewing them is they have not delivered a level of training for technology suitable to the learning capacity of older workers. So it's okay to sit down and you can zip through screens all you want. But usually for people who came through a different era and are not as skilled in that computer, they don't learn, and so they get left behind. So technology barriers are there. A feeling of replacing, all other jobs for younger workers are there. Ageism certainly is there. Boomer is a new one. Well, I passed boomer. I miss it. I'm a septuagenarian now. Next step for me is skipper or geezer. But there is ageism. We call it the silver ceiling, And so there are still problems there, but there's huge opportunities there for employers. And I'm looking forward to the Board of Trade seizing on that.
So before I open it to the floor, can I get from each of you, and we can just start with you, Mike, and go this way, give me one solution you think we could implement to make the workforce more welcoming for older workers.
What we're doing here today, education, discussion, put the issue on the burner where it hasn't been before and follow up from this. But awareness, this is a great start.
I think I would go with something that came up in several of the presentations, and that's a flexibility. I find I've started a new job, which I adore, and it's like, what, 2 weeks vacation or, whatever it is. Maybe I would be happier if, there was more time. My children have joined the exodus of people leaving the province. I have one cat who's healthy and no dog, so I don't really have that kind of thing. But I still need to work because I'm paying for being a single parent and having 2 kids who have no student debt. But I think flexibility, being able to work from home, being able to, work away, I think that's a thing that's really important to me at this age.
Okay, I think that one thing we can do is to let people out there of all ages know that they're all welcome in the workforce. Therefore, dispel that myth that older people shouldn't work or don't want to work or too whatever. I'm not saying those things, but and I think that's what we really need to do. Because I do know that when I worked in the Confederation building, there was many times people would ask me questions like, "Well, when is it you're going to retire? When is it you're going to retire?" And you'd really feel like, "Oh my God, are they looking for my job?" Like, really and truly, I'm not ready to retire yet, but you'd feel that sense of being pushed out the door. So I think people need to feel that their jobs, if they want to continue to work, and they're skilled and have the abilities and can contribute, then that's all it really matters, is that, we all should be welcome to continue to do that. So to me, that would be one suggestion.
There are a couple things we know we could do. And that is, we have 75 employees now at Rocket. And so in terms of scheduling, it's kind of, it's hard, it's a tough job to be the scheduler at Rocket. But and so we usually are looking for people who can work full time first, because that helps us develop a schedule. But I think being flexible, to Suzanne's point, in maybe having more part-time workers come to work at Rocket, just being open to that would be one thing. And I think shorter shifts rather than an 8-hour shift, offering a 4, 5, 6-hour shifts, just to help mitigate the fact that you're on your feet all day. I find it energizing talking to people, and the time goes by really fast, but I know some people get tired working on their feet. So maybe having shorter shifts would help as well.
I have more questions, but in the interest of keeping us on time, let's open it up. So if we have maybe a question from the audience. Mm-hmm. So many questions. We have one right here. Good. I'm hoping some of you ask my questions.
Do you want this one? Do you want this one?
So this is less of a question and more of a follow-up to your last question about what we can do. I work in the nonprofit sector, and I work primarily in rural Newfoundland. The organizations I work with have positions for older workers. And surprisingly, in many rural communities, there are a lot of older workers who are willing to work. The problem with most nonprofits is that the funding they receive for employment is for students. The challenge is that there are no students in many rural communities. I do a lot of work in the community of Ferryland, an hour south of St. John's. We cannot fill student positions. But because the funding mandates we have to hire students, we can't fill them with anything else. So one simple position is for government to recognize that these student employment, it's simply not relevant in a lot of rural communities now, and that perhaps we need to switch the funding priority to employing older workers.
Thank you for that. Anybody care to respond to that? You don't have to.
I noticed this morning, I'd responded on Twitter this morning, there was an ad put out. I won't identify the group, but it had funding for some employment-ready things that went from age 19 to 45. And I couldn't help but go back and say, well, why 45? But maybe half facetiously, it might have been unfair. But what you're saying is true. Bearing in mind that creating opportunities for students is very important. However, your group should have the option that if you don't have the body of people to take it from, you should be able to expand that and use that funding. Yeah.
And we used the co-op marketing program at mine. Until recently we did, and that subsidy helps us so much, and we're able to offer training to students. Now, if we had the same thing for older workers, it would be a total boon. It would be awesome.
Perhaps not a very sensible comment, but how do you define a student? I like to study Spanish. A Spanish course, does that make me a student?
Thank you. Kelly, there are lots of new technology loos that might resolve your problem.
New technology, sorry, what?
Loos, bathrooms.
Oh,
Toilets.
yeah.
But seriously, there's an interesting mismatch. We hear that 44,000 people are looking for work, and yet everywhere you look, the employees and the signs in the windows are saying, we need to hire more workers, come and apply for a job. Is there anybody here from the Department of Labour? Is it Labour with government? Is that the current department? Anybody? Would seem to me that perhaps government, or if they can think outside the box, which I know is rather difficult for them to do, but if they could, obviously, clearly, there needs to be some interface between the people who want to hire people and the people who are looking for jobs.
I agree with that. I did write a letter to the minister in charge of, I don't even know what the name of it was, just saying, we want to hire, this was a few years ago now, we want to hire older workers. Can you plug me into some group that can give me access to them so I can say, I've got all these jobs? And it was just like, not really. You know, there wasn't that help available. And there must be some group that I can say, okay, I've got these jobs. They have to be able to climb stairs, carry a bin of dishes, and work fairly quickly. I mean, there's certain things for customer service, you know, realities that you have to be able to move quickly. So there are parameters, but you know, I'm going to be 60 this month. I'm carrying bins of dishes around, and I know other people can do it too. So I know they're out there. I know those people are out there, and there has to be an interface. I think you're correct to connect us with that population.
I think, too, there has been in the past initiatives such as the Targeted Initiative for Older Workers, but really in Newfoundland and Labrador now, that doesn't really exist. I mean, am I fair in saying that? Is there anybody here who would, yeah? That's not operating. And even when it did in Newfoundland and Labrador, it was really about displaced fish plant workers, et cetera, et cetera. So that really didn't fill the need. So I think that, you know, historically we have focused on student employment programs and, you know, hiring youth and et cetera, et cetera. And I think it is wonderful, you know, walking into the Legacy Center in Cupid's and meeting all the young students there and the things that they're learning. And I think that's all wonderful. But boy, you know what? It could be even more enhanced if there was an intergenerational group there. Because boy, I'll tell you, some of the people who lived that experience can give a even more robust experience to all those tourists who come. So I think that you're right. I mean, I think we need to be looking at nationally and provincially at programs to support older workers.
Flexible work schedules usually mean fewer hours. Fewer hours usually means no benefits. I think there's a threshold below which you don't need to offer benefits. So if you do want to hire older workers, is there a responsibility on employers to offer benefits, and is that affordable?
If I may, I just went through that, Mike, in my own workplace. When you get of a certain age, you may have medical appointments and things that need to be done. So you, rather than spread it all over the place, disrupted schedules and things like that, or use time for a medical appointment that you really. So I decided to go to a 4-day work week. As a result of going to the 4-day work week, it was a reduction in hours. So I couldn't do 4/10s anymore, or I couldn't do 4/10s. It was still at 8s. So rather than 5/8s, it was 4/8s. So by doing so, I lost all opportunity for any overtime because there are circumstances that they base overtime on over 40 hours. So I lost all opportunity for that. I lost all opportunity to participate in bonus programs. So you must be full 40-hour-a-week schedule. Now this is not a negative reflection on my employer. We're a multinational, and these programs are throughout. So I only bring it out, and it's no reflection on a wonderful management staff that I work with here. Tremendous, you can't get any better. But it's a reflection that, so I lost a lot and by not working a full schedule. I needed it, and the local center was tremendously supportive. However, the rules that are set up said no. So I probably lost in 1 month there maybe about $600-700 in bonuses and overtime. So should employers look at that and being flex scheduling? I believe I think that would enhance them, bearing in mind that these businesses must make a profit, and if they don't make a profit, they don't exist. None of our jobs exist. However, I think there's leeway. We don't have many other 70-year-olds in there looking for a reduced schedule. Anyway, thank you. Yeah, Dave. Dave, if I may, I just quickly want to touch. Dave, there is no bridging group between the 44,000 and the jobs that are out there. And that's a big problem. And that's what part of this is all about.
I was just going to add that it's kind of a cyclical thing as an entrepreneur. You know, I mentioned it earlier, and that is that if you're spending your money on training and training and training, you don't, like we look at this balance sheet, and in the food and beverage industry especially, the margins are so narrow. I'm just saying, why am I wasting all this money on retraining people that, you know, are off doing their Europe trip or whatever, when I could be training someone once and hopefully they'll stay with me longer, therefore I can use the money to offer health benefits, which are you know, really expensive, but would ultimately make working at Rocket more attractive, therefore people would stay with us. So it's like a cyclical thing, you know. So getting that cycle started, maybe with government assistance through a program of some kind, would benefit not only you know, us personally, but the economy, because we can offer more and hire more people and offer people a better wage and all that kind of thing. So I'm just thinking, if your multinational company is cutting out benefits, what does a small company like me, how do we do it, you know?
Yeah. Well, if I may, before she leaves that topic, cutting out benefits. When I lost benefits, I went to the private market to buy it, and they gave me a phenomenally high quote that they didn't want me, I knew, so it was ridiculously high amount of money. Yes, we'll cover you, but it's, you know, well, they knew I was going to turn it down. I went to the province and said, you have a Medicare program, you give it away. I'm willing to buy it. I recognize that I have to pay a higher price. I'm 70 years old, but I'll pay it. I'd like to be able to buy that for my own independence. And they were in shock. It was like, what? And I said, well, you may have more people coming. You might want to step outside the box a bit. So I'm sorry to interrupt. There was somebody there. But
That's okay. So here's what I would like to do. We have 1, 2, 3 questions.
I think there's someone over here.
Oh, 4. Let's do 2 and 2. Let's do 2 questions, and then we'll do 2 more, and then we'll close it. How's that? Okay.
Hi, Rhonda Telk Lane, St. John's Board of Trade. I'm going to debunk a myth right now. So I think there is a bridging program. It's just started. It's called Connector NL. It was started for graduates and immigrants, and our connector is here in the room. I'll throw it over. Maybe she can add a little bit, or you'll get to know her later. We have added a stream for experienced workers. It matches employers with people looking for jobs. It grows your network. That's the premise of Connector NL, but as you grow your network and we match the right people together, we've secured over 90 or 100 full-time jobs. So connectornl.ca now has an experience stream. And Shannon Mugford is here from our Corner Brook office in partnership with the Corner Brook Board of Trade, who handles the West Coast. So hopefully you'll get a chance to meet Shanna. We also have legs in the ground in Grand Falls, Windsor, working the central region, and an Avalon coordinator. So we're about to ramp up that experience stream and start getting people connected with jobs and the talent. So we're really excited that it's alive and well and ready to go.
Awesome.
Hi, I'm not a well-known person around here, but I am in healthcare, and right now healthcare instructor, but I've worked all over this island, from Port aux Basques, Corner Brook, whatever. But trying to stay in the workforce, not to put down people who are looking for your minimum wage job, like because I'm a healthcare worker and trying to get back into the workforce, like my brother worked from a director to minimum wage. And we see that a lot as seniors, that we are being offered minimum wage jobs. So, and also, I was also told, like, say, behind the scenes, you weren't hired because we can hire 2 people for your job. You know, your salary I can hire 2 new grads, right? So the problem is with our age group is that a lot of the jobs being offered are minimum wage jobs. And I find that a little demeaning. I might be, don't call me a snoot, but I do find that, you know, I can bake like the best of them. You can see my name if you want to after. But I would love to work, but I also understand business because I was a business owner for 7 years. So Of the 44,000 that are working, my question is, how many of those are professionals really don't want to go into lower paying jobs?
Okay. So, would you like to address the comment and the question? And then we'll do 2 more questions over there.
I would love to talk about that. I'm totally the reflection of you, because I'm shy to offer someone who I know has a professional background a minimum wage job. I mean, we start slightly above minimum wage, but it's the reality of our industry. And I can only hope that someone who is coming to me for a job, who may have had a professional, you know, making way more than I'm making now, might consider the benefits of working at a place like Rocket, which is, you know, fun, a community-oriented, something going on every day. You know, that engagement with community. I know I've talked to a lot of people who say that loneliness is a big issue when you're retired, and you know that's the antithesis of what goes on at Rocket. It's just people, people, people all the time, and so that's the only thing I can offer over and above the minimum wage at the moment. But I do feel if I were to offer you a job and I only could pay this much, I'm shy about that. But it's kind of the reality of the financial, yeah.
And I think it's the type of work. I mean, nobody would go to Rocket and expect to make, you know, $100,000 a year. Not even the owners, I'm sure. I know that there's a building supply company, I guess I can say, they've actually focused their employment on older workers, I think, and I know several people who've left careers, you know, who've retired, done that, you know, maybe they're lonely, maybe they need a little bit of extra money, and they go to Kent because it's a hobby, you know, they've always liked building things, or they've always liked crafts, so that solution is there. But you're right, as you, in a field like healthcare or, you know, in communications, which is what I'm used to, every year that you work, you make more money, and so it's hard to suddenly realize that you can't really, your field even can't afford you, it sounds like in your case. Yeah, and so they can hire 2 new grads for what you would expect to be paid. So that's I don't know what the answer is to that, but it's certainly a reality.
How many are professionals like me who would like to work, but they're not going to admit that they don't want to go down to minimum wage.
Well, we come across that quite a bit, and I mean, I made more money in 1976 than I make at the job I am now. So money is not my motivator. It helps. It's good you get a paycheck every 2 weeks. So we have choices to make. Businesses have to survive. They can do what they can do. Now, if there's an abuse, that's different. But most of them that I meet in the local market, they've got so much money to allocate to staffing, and they're many times hanging on by their thread, you know, by their nails. So it's not a big problem to come along, but we've sometimes, as aging workers, as Jean said, we've made more money, and we've worked many times to the top of, you know, from the days that I had my dinners in the Bank of America Tower in Hong Kong to what I do now are a big difference, and we have to face that reality. It takes soon enough, though, if an employer sees your value there, they quick enough move you to a different wage band if they want to keep you. Sometimes you got to start slow.
Okay. Last 2 questions, one over there, and Dr. Stephen Bornstein.
Oh, my turn? Not so much a question as just a comment to what can be done. Awareness, I think, is a big thing. Rhonda had mentioned the Connector program. There career development professionals in Newfoundland are like our best kept secret. I'm one of them. We work mostly in not-for-profits, and some places offer wage subsidies based on different criteria. I work at the Murphy Center. We have a wage subsidy, and there's no age attached to that. We also do have skills link programs and so on, where they're there for under 30 and so on, but we have individualized employment counseling to anyone who is struggling to attach to work. So there are services out there. And they can offer things like the support, depending on how much support you need. When we talk about having a hard time applying for jobs online and those type of barriers, then the support is as intensive as it needs to be as the person is looking for. There are also lots of workshops available through places like the Y and Techno Tutors who do technology type of workshops. And again, the not-for-profit agencies offer workshops for free. The Murphy Center does that. And then there are other wage subsidy programs available. There is money available through the provincial government for businesses to train people, be it older workers or any workers. And then, as I said, various programs have wage subsidies to try to help people get their foot in the door with employers. So just the awareness overall and the services that are out there available to people. One of the websites that I suggest people go on to is the Thrive CYN website, and it has an amazing list of all different services in St. John's and in Newfoundland, and you can look by employment, for example, and it can connect you to many different organizations offering those type of services.
Thank you. Dr. Borstein?
This is a fascinating discussion, so thanks to all of you. I note one interesting spin in this entire morning. This is all about the private sector, including the economic data that we got. A very large fraction of the Newfoundland workforce actually works in the public sector, much higher than in most of the rest of Canada. And all of you, except for Suzanne, are private sector people. So this is a question for Suzanne. Okay, well, yeah, okay. Not-for-profit is sort of halfway between. But for Suzanne, to what extent do all these generalizations about obstacles for employment and possible solutions fit the public sector? Or does Mr. Keogh's point, businesses have to make a profit, otherwise they can't do anything, does that really apply to the public sector?
Well, I think it does. I think that you know, in my experience, I've worked since 2005 within mainstream government, I guess. I came into this position in 2007, which is actually an independent office reporting to the House of Assembly. But, and in prior to that, I worked in the healthcare system. And, you know, I've seen over the years many times, and I think this lady here is a prime example of coming to a certain age and being pushed out the door and being saying here, like, you know, we need to lay off people. So, you know, here's your benefits for, you know, the future, and then people are left their work, and then they're looking for work part-time or being reintroduced into the workforce, and it is very, very difficult to do that. So I think many of these elements are similar elements. I've had people say to me, you know, who've worked with the other kinds of agencies and departments, that they feel like sometimes that other people are looking, younger people are looking at them saying, you know, I'd like to be in that job, or when is it you're leaving anyway? So there's always that pressure, that feeling of you know, perhaps, you know, the time has come for your usefulness or your whatever, and for you to go. Part of that is our own problem, you know that. You know, part of that is ourselves, allowing ourselves to feel like that. So I knew one time I met this guy who's a cameraman, and he said to me, oh, this happens to me all the time. You know, the younger kids are saying to me, when are you going, when are you going? And I keep saying to them, that's just another week you added on to it. That's just another week. But he said, I really feel that pressure. So regardless of whether it's public or private, you know, that kind of attitude is there. When you turn 65, if you're working with the public system, you actually lose your disability benefits as well. So there are that's a whole other issue that maybe some of you might be interested in talking about, you know, as we go on. So I think, Stephen, I think that, you know, it exists in all areas where people work. Now, there's lots and lots of people out there who'll say, well, you work for government, that you get the big bucks and the big dollars, and you shouldn't have jobs, and you shouldn't have whatever, that the private sector are the ones that, are the drivers and the movers and shakers. My own husband used to say that to me. And then I'd say, yeah, but I'm the boss in this house. But, I think it's there. There's an element of it everywhere. Maintaining and keeping valued employees who have the knowledge, the skills, the abilities, and that corporate knowledge. I don't even know how you can possibly, and that's what you're talking about. You're talking about holding on to those employees who learn those skills and abilities and ways of communicating and you've gone through it all. You've seen how many times have things not worked out, and you've seen that, and all of a sudden, and now I'm of an age at 62, I've said, my gosh, we already tried that years ago, and here we are now right back to that again. We lose that. When you start to retire people too early or push them out the door, then you're going to lose that knowledge base. So, in my opinion, I think it's similar in all aspects.
Stephen, if I may touch on it as well, I worked for a couple of years at a director level in government, and it's a different ball of wax. It's a different era, but there is pressure in there, especially when politicians change. They come and go, and they're so disruptive to the whole status quo. They may flood it with extra people that are not needed, or they may just slash and burn. In our workplace, we have quite a number of people who are retired from the public service that can't make enough money on their pensions to survive. And when you come from a specialized work environment, such as a public service, where you're pretty focused on what you do, it's a big adjustment, psychological adjustment process for them to make it, in both loss of pay and in feeling worthy to participate. So my heart goes out. There are people there's a lot of jealousy in the private sector from those who do not have defined benefit plans, which the public sector up to now, for the most part, has had. But there's a lot of, oh, geez, you got it made by, you're retired from government, you're retired from Newfoundland Power, you're retired from, wherever you are. But I tell you, we've got a workforce that has more than its fair share of people who can't make it on their pensions. That's why they're there. And there's more coming, Thank you.
I have a feeling we could keep going, but in interest of time and keeping to some sort of a schedule, I would like to thank our panel. This was a really interesting discussion. And I'll hand it over to Kathy.
Thank you, Boyan, and thank you also to the panel. I won't keep you very long. We can go into a break, but I did want to give you a quick heads up for what's to come, I guess. We will be, after the break, going into themed tables. So this is the point where we're going to kind of drill down and roll up our sleeves and all of those other cliches. But really a chance for us to work together and figure out what are some possible actions, what are some possible solutions that we can suggest, and also be involved in. So there is a piece of this that you're not going to necessarily be able to walk away free of anything to do after this point. No one's going to hold your feet to the fire, of course, necessarily. We just want to provide an opportunity for people to really continue to be engaged in this process. I feel like there are so many different possible solutions that have already been talked about today, and it's hard to really put one group in charge of the actions for this, and that's one of the reasons why we had a committee come together to put this event together, and another reason why we wanted to start this process with an event like this, because there are so many different key players, so many organizations that can play a role in the actions coming out of this. So this is really the opportunity we get to do that. So because we have such a mixed group of folks in the room, we're going to divide up the tables, and you guys get to self-select where you want to go and what sort of issues or what sort of solutions you want to be able to discuss and dig into. So we have off the top some themes. So public policy will be one table, and I call this capital P public policy. So this is your legislation, your big changes, broad-based changes. Employer-related policy or employer-related programs, that kind of employer perspective. Employee supports will be another theme that you could select. If you want to talk about things from a rural perspective, we'll have a rural table. If you want to speak about things from a woman's perspective, as an older worker, female older workers potentially face different challenges, so we'll have a table dedicated to that. And also people with disabilities or an inclusion perspective, of course, that kind of goes for the whole population, but as we age, of course, there's lots of acquired disabilities and accommodations that could take place that really will enable people to have a more inclusive workplace. So we want to kind of put a stamp on that table as well. So you can self-select. Based on the numbers at the table, we may have more than one table for each of those themes. So if there's a ton of people who want to talk about capital P public policy, then we'll have 2 of those tables. We have table facilitators for each. And so we can be a bit flexible. If there's only 2 or 3 people who select one of the particular themes, then we may say, do you have a second option? If you really don't and you're desperate to do that, then maybe we'll figure something out. So this will be the topic that you'll talk about with your group for the rest of the afternoon. There will be a chance for you to hear what the other groups are talking about, but this is the one that you really want to dig into. So think about it over the break, whether you want to talk about public policy changes, whether you want to talk about employer policies, employee supports, things from a rural perspective, from a woman's perspective, or for people with disabilities or an inclusion perspective. So think about those 6 themes. We'll place some table cards around. You can self-select if there are not enough seats at the table when you come back. That's okay. Stand around that table and we'll do a little like raffle or whatever else to see who gets to stay and who gets to go. Anyway, we're going to take 15 minutes. We should have some snacks there, but I think they're coming. Yeah. We're providing lunch too. Yes, and lunch will be provided.